Okay, we're back in the H.454 Conference Committee. And the top item for the agenda for the next till noon is to hear from the administration, if you will, the third party to what we're working on here. And we had Jason Marucci here from the governor's office, and so the floor is yours.
Just before we get started, there was a request just because of the way documents are posted online, we can use section number over page number where possible.
Yeah.
For the viewing public.
So for the record, Jason Malucci, I'm the governor's director of policy development and legislative affairs. Thank you for inviting me to share more of the governor's perspective as you deliberate H.454. First of all, I want to thank the conferees here today. We've spent a lot of hours together over the last few months, which I believe have been helpful and productive, and I hope you do too. It's clear that we all share the goal of building a stronger education system for Vermont. I also want to make the point for those who might be tuning in that although we have some disagreements, it's clear there is broad consensus between the governor and both chambers of the legislature that we should transition to a new funding system, a foundation formula, and move towards a significantly more efficient and effective governance structure, which will allow more resources to flow directly towards improving equity and opportunity for Vermont students. I don't think we should lose sight of how significant it is that we have pretty broad consensus on those two objectives and how unlikely that would have seemed not too long ago. By now, I hope you've had the opportunity to read the governor's letter to this committee of conference, which I'll spend a few minutes discussing. You've also received a side-by-side with recommended changes from the governor and feedback from AOE and the Department of Taxes. And I know you had tax here this morning as well. I want to emphasize that some of the changes the governor is seeking in order to get to yes are in the letter, not just the side-by-side, because some of the things that we're asking for are not reflected currently in either versions of H.454. So to take a quick step back, the governor believes we have a rare once-in-a-generation opportunity to make transformative change. And I think there's little doubt what helped precipitate that, and that's the property tax trajectory that we've been on, which Vermonters responded to pretty loudly last year. And it's also put a strain on our education system, which is resulting in cuts to programs and services for Vermont's kids. Before this session began, the speaker and the pro tem invited the governor to share his ideas for how to improve the system. I don't know if you all expected us to go as big as we did, but the governor felt strongly that we had the opportunity to be bold together, as he mentioned in his inaugural address in January, and we couldn't miss this moment. And it was also the responsible thing to do because we know that funding, governance, and quality are all interconnected. And on behalf of the governor, too, I just want to quickly acknowledge and express our and his appreciation to Secretary Saunders and her team and the team at Department of Taxes and the many hardworking state employees who have engaged with you all on these conversations throughout the last 4 months. I don't think we'd be in this situation without the hard work from the folks and their teams. As the governor mentioned in his letter, as he evaluates the final bill before it reaches his desk, he's been clear that he believes we cannot spend more than we are today because Vermonters can't afford it. We're the top per pupil spending state in the nation, but we're not getting the best return on that investment. And we need to be smarter about how we invest those dollars. But we have a very unique opportunity because we have the opportunity, as both committees and both chambers have discussed over the course of the last few months, to both provide stability and relief on the property tax side while also providing more opportunities for Vermont's kids, directing more resources towards students, schools, and teachers, and achieving more equity from region to region. We need to be honest with ourselves about the inequities in funding and resources that exist in our current system, and that we can't just spend our way out of the structural barriers to high quality education for every student. It's not a cookie cutter, one size fits all approach to our education system. This is about fairness and a belief that every kid, no matter their zip code, deserves the same shot at a world-class education. I think that's a goal that we all share. When evaluating overall spending in the context of a final bill before it reaches the governor's desk, he believes it's critical to account for all funding, not just the education payment. We know costs in areas like special ed could go up. We should account for it. We should have a full picture of what the potential costs will be as we make these transitions. Likewise, I know we've discussed this with many of you throughout this process. We know we'll need to do something to address CTE governance next year and have some policy decisions to make around that. So those potential costs should be clearly accounted for. And if there's a chance that that cost won't be carried in the base in the future, we should account for it outside of the base. So we're very clear and transparent with the field about what the picture will look like before this is implemented. Second, in the governor's letter, he indicated we have concerns about the timelines contemplated in both of the current versions of 454. The governor proposed the beginning making these transitions, governance and funding in FY28. The current system we don't believe is sustainable. We don't believe that we have the hundreds of millions of dollars year over year to float the system and buy down rates for 4 years, while districts are currently, as we know, making the decisions every year to make significant cuts. So we're concerned that the status quo for 4 years isn't workable for our system. We recognize there are some significant challenges to the timeline. This is going to be a ton of work, but from the governor's perspective, 4 years is too long. The third, property taxes. I don't think that'll surprise everyone. Again, I think one of the primary objectives of the governor and many of you is to bring down property tax pressure. I know we've heard that from members of both parties and both bodies. That seems to be a shared objective. But we cannot allow areas of our state which currently have lower than average tax rates to see a significant increase as we turn to a uniform homestead rate. Many of these communities are economically disadvantaged and they're ones that can least afford those increases. And as the governor noted in his letter, his original proposal contemplated less overall spending than we're considering in the current versions of H.454, which meant lower average statewide homestead rates. So if we're contemplating higher spending levels, the governor believes we must address the property tax. Hey, Emily.
Hi, I'm sorry.
That's right. Problem that creates for those communities, which leads me to supplemental spending. Like both the House and Senate positions, the governor originally proposed allowing for 10% supplemental district spending. But again, that was in the context of lower overall spending and a 5-district model with relative property wealth parity. As the governor wrote in his letter, in a foundation formula that's calibrated more towards current spending levels, we don't believe there's tax capacity for supplemental at 10% above, which could significantly increase the cost of the system. So if we're spending at levels that are more in line with what we're currently spending, we have affordability concerns with allowing a 10% supplemental over the top. And I know the tax department has provided feedback from our perspective of if we do choose to do supplemental, how some of those affordability concerns could be mitigated. On the redistricting process, I first want to reiterate that it would have been obviously the governor's strong preference to have done the districts this session. Understand that that's not the direction that the chambers have gone, and the governor can support the summer task force model, but it's a priority for him that we make every effort to ensure that the legislature and the governor can move quickly to approve a new map in January. As we saw this year, many of the important decisions we have to make around education quality in particular, or CTE, depend on knowing what the district structure will look like, with a clear pathway to scale and supporting our vision of local elementary, central middle school, and regional high schools. And the governance transformation needs to also consider regions of our states that currently rely on different models, including tuitioning. I believe we all agree this plan needs to work for all Vermonters, whether you live in Maidstone or Manchester. governor also believes that redistricting is a legislative function. It will be the legislature that ultimately approves the lines, and it's important that they're involved in creating them as well. Of course, we would support active engagement and input from the field, stakeholders, experts, the public, and they should have a voice in that process. As that process unfolds, we would support a consensus map posed by the task force for an up or down vote in the legislature in January. That's one tool we think could help expedite the process of approval, because again, we think that all of us in the field having an understanding of where we're going in terms of governance is critical. Lastly, when the governor first rolled out his plan, he was clear that the money should mean something. We should set expectations for what we expect districts should be able to do with the substantial amount of investment the state will continue to make in public education. For that reason, we proposed an evidence-based approach, which gives a roadmap for how funds can support education quality and contemplates scale, which could result in lower overall spending. Too often we hear about the strain of unfunded mandates on our schools. The state has established these clear policy objectives, and we believe it's our responsibility to ensure that state funding supports those quality measures, and there's clear assumptions for how districts can do that. But whether we're contemplating the governor's original proposal, his evidence-based enhancement approach that's been shared, or either the Senate or House passed versions of 454, Vermont will remain one of the nation's top investors in public education, and that's something to be proud of. But with these dollars, the governor has shared his objective that while transitioning to the foundation formula and achieving scale, our policy priorities should continue to be expanding early childhood education, increasing after school and summer programs in underserved communities, ensuring every student has access to a diverse coursework, arts, extracurriculars, and more, additional access to mental health services for students, college and career pathways starting in middle school, and culminating in graduates being prepared and trained for critical jobs in high demand industries, and raising teacher salaries to ensure every Vermont student has access to a high quality teacher, and that teachers are valued as professionals no matter where they are teaching. And I know much of this policy work will be done next year, but I believe it's important that we all collectively express the intent that that's where we want to go. Those are the priorities we have. And we think that some of the funding that we approved this year should align with some of those priorities as we make this transition. Again, there are more recommendations from the governor, AOE, and tax on the side by side that was shared with you all. And if you have questions about those or more technical ones, either AOE or tax would be happy to speak towards more of the details there. But I just want to express again, the governor does remain optimistic that we can find a pathway forward, that we can do this hopefully quickly, and find something that earns the support of bipartisan majorities in both chambers of the legislature and the governor's signature. And as he's said before, as we make change of this scale and magnitude, that will be, no matter what timeline or how we do it, will be disruptive. It will be difficult work. He thinks it's important that there's bipartisan buy-in and bipartisan consensus towards doing that work. So we're very optimistic that we'll be able to find a path forward together, get out of here sooner rather than later. Tomorrow, we'd love that too. And move forward. So happy to take any questions. And again, if there are more specific questions about the side-by-side or the enhanced evidence-based model, I'd be happy to have some of our team come in who are more equipped to speak to those details. But I don't know if that's what.
I have
Just questions from.
yeah. Two questions. One, you talked about how the governor thought of the district mapping process as a legislative function, which makes sense. Does the governor also think of the voting district mapping as a legislative function? They strike me as comparable in level.
Yeah, I know you guys discussed that yesterday with the secretary. I haven't had a chance to listen to that portion of the testimony on that feedback. We had worked on the House side from the governor's perspective, we want elections to happen as quickly as possible, because whether we go with which date for implementation, I think the sooner we have those officials in place, even if it's on a transition basis, the better, because there'll be a lot of work in the transition. I would imagine that the legislature would be those approving how the voting the voting works. So he would be open to that. And I don't know if there have been other considerations. And again, I didn't listen to Secretary Copeland-Hansis yesterday.
And I have one more question. I'm happy to. One thing that we've been grappling with a lot since actually the Education Finance Subcommittee of the Commission and talking to the Secretary about and other folks is the cost of special education, which we pay for in a wide variety of ways in sort of various education fund buckets, and is a sort of a contractual obligation between districts and families, and legal responsibility from the feds, all of that. There are ways, and we've certainly tried in the past, to sort of place certain caps on how much money leaves sort of certain kinds of state dollars, but then there are lots of ways outside of those that districts are obligated to spend that special education money. And so as we look to reduce costs and increase quality, I'm trying to get my head around where the governor sees the Agency of Education's responsibility, especially around extraordinary special education costs and lowering those, which is, I think, one of the most rapidly growing parts of our education spending, and one that has not gotten a lot of attention compared to, say, healthcare costs.
Yeah, I would say, I think the governor knows the agency has a lot of work ahead of it, special education, and as we do this transition, they're going to need to be resourced. We asked, I believe it was included in the Senate version of 454, for positions to help support that transition work. And we know a lot of, AOE has significantly fewer employees than it did pre-Great Recession. The secretary has been working very hard to increase capacity, bring on more, hire for some critical positions. I think they've made a lot of progress in the last couple of weeks around some of those critical positions, and more help will be needed as we make this transition. And these positions that the governor's asked for, that we're appreciative, there appears to be consensus, will help, but we know we'll need to do more to expand the agency's capacity.
And I think I want to offer, not from an education policy perspective, and so I'm sorry for that to all the families with kids who are accessing special education, but that's a really important part of their lives and their quality of life. The policy solutions around extraordinary special education costs are really, I think, outside of the legislature's hands. I think they're in the hands of the administration. And so when I think about ensuring that we are reducing costs in this piece of legislation, I just want to say for the record and to you that I think that the reduction of that cost is in the hands of the administration and not in the hands of the legislative policy.
Understood.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks. Just in the sort of percentage of publicly funded students that would qualify for an independent school, the House version adopted the governor's language, but the governor has changed his recommendation in this.
Yeah, I would say the 51% threshold that the governor originally proposed in January was part of an entire new way of thinking around school choice. There wasn't much appetite in the legislature for pursuing that path, and it was all interconnected. He feels that the two-step threshold could be a good compromise that the Senate has proposed. So he's signaling he's open to that compromise, as suggested. I think it's 25 plus the location criteria.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. We appreciated the governor's original definition of how we should recognize that certain independent schools have traditionally provided public education. A little curious as to that departure, but I appreciate your explanation. The other part I just want to ask about, and this is really just a clarification question. So the Senate put in the positions that I think were called for in the budget. We're going to get some better clarification on that. But do the proposal from the Senate with the positions, were those reflected in the budget original budget memo from the AOE?
The original budget memo from AOE, yes. I don't know
I mean, it says here the governor supports this.
Yeah,
But
oh, yeah,
I'm kind of assuming so.
yeah.
Um,
I don't remember the timeline for when they sent the memo to which committees went along the process.
Am I,
The governor had the $4 million in his
Right, right.
GovReg budget in January.
Yeah. The Senate proposal calls for these being limited service positions. And I didn't know if y'all had a position on whether they're limited service or permanent. Right. And again, I can't remember from the original budget memo.
Yeah, so we went with the 4 million in one time, and we called out that we believe these positions will be needed for more than 1 year.
Yeah.
Some of them might not need to be permanent because some of them are focused specifically on the governance transition, which will eventually end, we hope. So there is an acknowledgement, there has been from the governor, that these positions won't just be for 1 year because that work will be needed for several to come, and he's committed to funding those in his GovReg next year.
Using one-time money multiple years and like that next year you'll ask for one-time money too?
I don't know. I don't want to get ahead of we just got through this budget.
Well, that's it for my questions.
Jason, does the governor, we have two different property tax credit proposals for it in front of us. The Senate spent the same amount of money as we do now, and the House spent $45 million more. We don't know where that money would come from yet. It's not property taxes, like what has the administration had any conversations about those two constructs?
Yeah, I mean, we had our own proposal at the beginning of the session. We reviewed both, I believe, taxes.
That's right, you had one as well.
Yeah, I think if there's disagreement, that resolution for that could wait until next year, because I believe in either versions, it's not contemplated going into effect until a lot of these changes go into effect. But I would say, you know, we had our original proposal, and I think it was closer to the.
They all use the
That
House
ended up-
side bench.
I'm not the expert on that one. I know tax was in here this morning, but. And I spoke to Senator Cummings on the way in.
It's not personal that you.
No, she told me she didn't need to be here because she agrees with everything I was gonna say.
Yes.
Joking for the record, I'm sure she has not.
And I would just offer to you that we have spent a different amount on our homestead, on our property tax credit over the last decade. It's a
It
fairly
varies each
arbitrary
year.
number, and
Yeah.
yes, I
I
imagine.
don't want to take a single year snapshot.
Seems a little strange.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Thank you.
So sorry I was late. We had 4 bills to get through and ways. and means. Gosh, that fire alarm. Terrible timing.
Fire alarm didn't help.
Yes.
So I guess we can go back, right?
Had we stopped? I thought we worked through everything.
Have we gone all?
I think we went through the whole bill, yeah.
Oh, we haven't. Yeah.
And we're next due here at 2, is that correct?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we can,
Any conflicts that have come up for you guys?
no,
Okay.
no.
Yeah, so we have 4 at 3.
Okay,
We're not sure exactly what's coming over from you, but we may be able to ask for dispensation.
okay. I'm personally clear for the rest of the day, except for a meeting at noon.
Same.
Yeah, we can look
Okay.
straight through.
Okay.
We'll look to see what's coming and then, which we don't know because.
Yep.
So we have to, yeah.
And I don't think any of us have any idea what we sent you, actually. Because we were here.
Okay,
Um,
so.
Do you want to, are you suggesting we break until then, or?
I think so.